She slapped a $50 a day fine on my mailbox post because it was, and I am quoting the violation notice directly, quote, an unapproved shade of brown, not because it was falling apart, not because it was blocking anyone's view, not because it violated any color palette that was actually written down anywhere, just because she didn't like the shade. That was it. That was the whole thing. And that was the moment I stopped trying to comply and started reading every single page of the HOA documents like my life depended on it. Let me back up. I bought my house at 14 Crestfield Lane in March. 3-bedroom craftsman, detached garage, and a mailbox post. I painted a warm walnut brown about 3 weeks after moving in. The previous post was rotting at the base. I replaced it, painted it, thought it looked sharp. Done. The HOA president was a woman named Diane. 58 years old, retired HR consultant, had been running the Maplewood Ridge HOA for 6 years by the time I showed up. She walked the neighborhood every single morning at 7 in the morning with a clipboard and a phone, photographing everything. Trash cans left out past noon on collection day. Basketball hoops 6 inches too close to the street. Holiday decorations up one day past the approved seasonal window. She treated the HOA like it was her full-time job and her personal kingdom at the same time. My neighbor across the street, Marcus, warned me about her my first week there. He'd lived on Crestfield Lane for 11 years. He told me over the fence one afternoon, quote, just do everything by the book and you'll be fine. But the second she thinks she has you on something, she won't let go. I nodded. I figured I was a reasonable person who followed reasonable rules. How hard could it be? Pretty hard, as it turned out. The first incident was in May, about 8 weeks after I moved in. I got a violation notice in the mail, actual postal mail, not email, saying my recycling bin was stored in an unapproved location. I had it beside my garage, tucked behind a low fence panel I'd built specifically to screen it from the street. The notice said bins must be stored out of sight from the street or within an enclosed structure. My enclosure didn't count because it wasn't permanent. I had to move the bin inside the garage. Fine, whatever. I moved it. The second incident was in July. My buddy Terrell parked his pickup truck on the grass alongside my driveway for about 4 hours while we unloaded some furniture. Terrell left at 2 in the afternoon. The violation notice was dated 11:30 in the morning. Diane had photographed his truck during her morning walk and mailed the notice before Terrell's truck was even gone. That one came with a $75 fine. I paid it. Annoyed, but I paid it. The third incident was in September. I put up a string of Edison lights along my back porch railing. They faced the backyard. You literally could not see them from the street. Diane sent a notice anyway, claiming a neighbor had complained. I asked which neighbor. The notice said complaints were confidential. I asked Marcus if he'd said anything. He laughed. He said, quote, she walks through the alley sometimes too. That's probably you, your neighbor, and your other neighbor all getting notices for the same lights. Sure enough, my neighbor on the other side, a woman named Priya who'd lived there 3 years, had gotten the exact same notice. We compared paperwork at the mailbox one afternoon like we were trading baseball cards. Priya told me she'd gone to a board meeting once to push back, and Diane ran the whole thing. She controlled the agenda, cut people off, and the other 2 board members just nodded, along with whatever she said. So by October, I'd paid $75, taken down my porch lights, rearranged my entire garage, and was walking on eggshells in my own home. And then came the mailbox. I got the notice on a Tuesday, October 14th. I remember the date because it was the day after my birthday. And I was in a decent mood right up until I opened my mailbox and found the violation notice inside the mailbox I was being cited for. The notice said my mailbox post was painted in an unapproved exterior color and cited Section 4.7 of the Maplewood Ridge HOA Design Guidelines. It said I had 14 days to repaint the post to a compliant color, and that failure to comply would result in a $50 per day fine starting on day 15. I went inside, I pulled up my HOA documents, which I had saved as a PDF when I bought the house. I found Section 4.7. It said, and I am copying this word for word, mailbox posts and structures must be maintained in good repair and painted in neutral or earth tone colors, consistent with the home's exterior palette. Walnut brown, earth tone. My house is tan siding with brown trim. The match was obvious. I photographed the house. I photographed the post. I stood there for a minute thinking I was missing something. I wasn't missing anything. Diane just didn't like it. I emailed the HOA contact address, which went to Diane. I explained that walnut brown was an earth tone, that it matched my home's exterior palette, and I attached photos and cited Section 4.7 back at her. She replied the next morning, her exact words, "The determination of compliant colors is at the discretion of the Architectural Review Committee." She did not say what colors were compliant. She did not say why mine wasn't. She just reasserted that it wasn't. I asked for the list of approved colors. She said there was no list and determinations were made on a case-by-case basis. I asked who was on the Architectural Review Committee. She said she was the chair and the committee met as needed. I sat with that for a full day. There was no list. The committee was one person. That person was Diane. And Diane had sole discretion to decide my mailbox was wrong and fine me $50 a day until she decided it was right. That was when I went back to the documents. Not skimming this time. Every single page, like I was studying for an exam. Maplewood Ridge HOA was incorporated in 1987. The original bylaws had been amended several times over the years. I spent 2 evenings reading everything. What I found was interesting. First, Section 9.3 of the bylaws required that the full board, 3 members, vote on any fine over $25, not the president alone. The board. A majority vote, documented in meeting minutes. Diane had been issuing fines by herself. My $75 parking fine had no board vote attached to it. Neither did any of the other fines I'd received. Second, Section 11.1 required that the HOA maintain a current copy of all design guidelines and make them available to homeowners within 10 business days of a request. There was no approved color list. If Diane was making color decisions on a case-by-case basis with no written standard, those decisions had nothing backing them up. Third, Section 7.4 required board elections every 2 years, with notice sent to all homeowners at least 60 days in advance. I asked Marcus when the last election was. He couldn't remember getting a notice. He thought maybe 4 years ago. I knocked on Priya's door. She'd been there 3 years and hadn't gotten an election notice either. Now I was interested. I went to the county recorder's office website. HOA documents, election records, incorporation filings. Some of that is public record. I spent a Saturday morning going through what I could access online, and then made an appointment to look at physical records. I brought a notepad and took notes for 2 hours. The HOA's last election certification filed with the county was from 2019. It was now 2024, 5 years. The bylaws required elections every 2 years. The other 2 board members listed in that 2019 filing, a man named Robert Gaines and a woman named Carol Sato, I didn't recognize. Marcus told me Robert had moved away in 2021 and Carol had moved away in 2020. Both board members were gone. Diane had not replaced them. Diane had not held elections. Diane had been running the HOA alone for at least 3 years. I called a real estate attorney named Kevin Park, found through a coworker referral. $200 for a 1-hour consultation. I laid out everything. Kevin told me that a nonprofit HOA that fails to hold required elections and operates without proper board quorum is on shaky legal ground. He told me fines issued without proper board authorization may be uncollectible and potentially recoverable. He told me the first step was a certified letter to the board, demanding a special homeowner meeting. Under the bylaws, I could request one with signatures from 10% of homeowners. Maplewood Ridge had 64 homes. I needed 7 signatures. I went home and made a 1-page flyer. Calm. Factual. No, Diane is a tyrant. Just. Did you know our bylaws require board elections every 2 years, and the last certified election was in 2019? Did you know fines over $25 require a full board vote? We are requesting a special homeowner meeting to review these issues. If you want to sign the petition, here's my email and phone number. I printed 30 copies. I knocked on 30 doors over 2 weekends. Most people were polite, but cautious. A few said they'd think about it, but several people told me their own Diane stories. A woman on Birchwood Court named Sandra had been fined $200 for garden gnomes. A retired couple on the other side of the development, Dave and Loretta, had been fighting with Diane for 8 months over the color of their shutters. A couple on Sycamore Drive had paid over $600 in accumulated fines over 2 years, for various small violations. Priya signed immediately. Marcus signed immediately. By the end of the second weekend, I had 14 signatures. Double what I needed. I sent a certified letter to Diane on a Friday morning, return receipt requested. Kevin helped me draft it. It cited the specific bylaw sections, listed the governance concerns, and formally requested a special meeting within 30 days, as provided under Section 8.6 of the bylaws. I copied it to every homeowner who had signed. Diane received it Monday. I got the return receipt Wednesday. She did not call a meeting. What she did instead was send me a new violation notice. This one cited my driveway edging as non-compliant and my exterior light fixture as a non-approved style. It also reduced my mailbox post-cure period from 14 days to 7 days, which she didn't have the authority to do. I showed the new notices to Kevin. He sent Diane a letter on his firm's letterhead the following Monday. It laid out the bylaw violations. It noted the fines appeared to lack board authorization. It requested the fines be stayed pending governance review. It also mentioned that retaliatory notices issued after a homeowner exercises their legal right to request a meeting could constitute a separate problem. Diane's response to Kevin's letter was to send violation notices to 6 of the 14 homeowners who had signed my petition. All within 5 days of Kevin's letter arriving. That was a mistake. I called Marcus. Marcus called Dave and Loretta, who were already furious and had been waiting for exactly this. Dave and Loretta called Sandra. Sandra had a sister-in-law who was a paralegal and had been telling her for a year to escalate. We had a meeting in Dave and Loretta's living room on a Thursday night. 11 people. Kevin joined by phone for 30 minutes. By the end, we had agreed on 3 things. First, Kevin would file a formal complaint with the state's HOA regulatory office on behalf of any homeowners who wanted to participate. 8 people signed on that night. The complaint detailed the election failures, the unauthorized fines, and the retaliation. Second, we would push forward with the special homeowner meeting. If Diane didn't call one within the 30-day window, Kevin said we could go to county court to compel it. She had about 2 weeks left. Third, we were documenting everything from that point forward. Every notice, every email, every interaction. Diane called the meeting on day 28. I think she thought she could control it. Her notice gave homeowners only 10 days, warning, technically compliant, but clearly designed to minimize turnout. 29 homeowners showed up. The meeting was in the community room at the neighborhood entrance. Folding chairs, fluorescent lights, a folding table at the front where Diane sat with 2 people she introduced as advisory members of the Architectural Review Committee. They were not board members. They were not elected. I wrote that down. Diane tried to run it the way she always ran things. She had a printed agenda. The first item was addressing recent misinformation circulated to homeowners. She started talking about how the bylaws gave the president broad administrative authority and how she had always acted in the community's best interests. Dave stood up and interrupted her. He asked, point blank, when the last board election was held and whether there was quorum to conduct HOA business. Diane said the board structure was a matter of ongoing discussion and that she was acting in an appropriate caretaker capacity. Dave said, quote, "That's not a yes or no answer." 6 other people said some version of that simultaneously. Diane lost control of the room inside 10 minutes. People started standing up and listing their fines one by one. And then Sandra walked to the front of the room and placed 3 ceramic garden gnomes on the table directly in front of Diane and said, quote, $200. I am not making that up. She physically brought the gnomes. When it was my turn, I walked through the governance timeline, the 2019 election, the board members who moved away, the 5 years with no certified election, the bylaw requirements. I had printed copies for anyone who wanted them and passed them down the rows. Diane interrupted me twice. The second time she said, quote, "You clearly have some kind of personal vendetta against me and this community." I said, quote, "I have a certified letter from you fining me $50 a day because you personally decided you didn't like the shade of brown on my mailbox post. I can show everyone the photo if you'd like." Someone in the back said, "Show it." I had it on my phone. I showed it. The room went sideways after that. The meeting ended without formal resolutions because there was no legitimate board to vote on anything. But Kevin had already prepared the next move. 2 days after the meeting, he filed in county court for an order compelling proper elections. Given the documented 5-year gap and the evidence we'd submitted, he said it was about as open and shut as HOA cases get. The court date was set 6 weeks out. Here's where it got better than I expected. About 2 weeks before the court date, I got a call from a woman named Janet, who lived on Birchwood Court, one street over. She said she'd been at the meeting and had something to share. I went over on a Sunday afternoon. Janet had a folder. Inside the folder were 3 years of HOA financial summaries Diane had sent out annually. Janet had kept every one. She pointed at the line for administrative expenses. It went from $1,200 in 2020 to $3,800 in 2021 to $6,100 in 2022 to $8,400 in 2023. Janet walked me through the math. The HOA collects about $38,000 a year in dues, 64 homes at $600 each. The maintenance contract for common areas runs $9,000. Liability insurance is around $2,400. That's roughly $11,400 in known fixed costs. So what was $8,400 in administrative expenses? Janet had asked Diane twice by email. She got vague responses about bookkeeping software, printing, and time compensation for board work. HOA board members in this state cannot pay themselves for their service unless the bylaws specifically authorize it. Our bylaws said nothing about board compensation. I forwarded Janet's folder to Kevin the same day. Kevin added a financial records demand to our court filing. Diane had 21 days to produce financial records going back 3 years. She produced them on day 20. Kevin spent a week going through them and called me on a Wednesday evening. He said, quote, "There are $22,000 in payments over 3 years, categorized as administrative expenses, that went to a sole proprietorship called Pruitt Administrative Services. There is no contract on file. There is no board vote authorizing the payments. The registered owner of Pruitt Administrative Services is Diane Pruitt." I sat with that for a second. So she was paying herself. Kevin said it appeared so, and that it was above his lane, but that if homeowners had been harmed, they had options, including reporting to the state attorney general's office. Dave and Loretta made that call. They had been paying the same dues as everyone else, and they were far angrier than me. Dave filed the complaint with the attorney general's office the following Monday. 8 other homeowners co-signed it. The court hearing went ahead on schedule. Diane showed up with her own attorney. Her attorney argued the HOA had been operating under an informal understanding, and that the election lapse was an oversight, not an abuse. Kevin's counter was a 3-page timeline and a stack of violation notices, with no documented board votes attached to any of them. The judge ordered new elections within 45 days. She ordered Diane to stop issuing fines or enforcement actions until a new board was seated. She ordered full financial records to be provided to any homeowner who requested them within 14 days. Diane's attorney asked that existing fine assessments against homeowners be confirmed as valid. The judge said fines issued without proper board authorization were unenforceable and directed the HOA to void them. Every fine I had paid was potentially recoverable. The $75 for Terrell's truck, all of it. Diane walked out of the courthouse without saying a word to anyone. The election was held 43 days later. Marcus ran, Dave ran, Priya ran. All 3 won without any real opposition. Diane did not run. I heard from Sandra that Diane had told a few people she was stepping back to focus on other things. The new board held their first meeting 3 days after the election. I went. It lasted 45 minutes, and they got through more legitimate business than the previous 6 years had apparently managed. They voted to hire a property management company to handle violations and fines going forward, with clear written guidelines posted on a neighborhood website. They voted to establish a written color palette for exterior elements, developed by an actual designer, available to all homeowners. They voted to review all outstanding fines from the previous 3 years and process refund requests. I filed a refund request for my $75. I got a check in the mail about a month later. The Attorney General's investigation into the $22,000 in payments to Pruitt Administrative Services was still ongoing when the election happened. I wasn't a party to it, so I don't have all the details. But Marcus told me about 4 months later that Diane had quietly settled something, repaid a portion of the funds, and agreed to be barred from serving in any officer role in the community going forward. Diane's morning clipboard walks stopped completely. I saw her car in her driveway less and less. By the following spring, she put her house on the market. It sold in about 3 weeks. I never spoke to her directly after the homeowner meeting. As for my mailbox post, it is still walnut brown. The new design guidelines, written by the designer the board hired, list warm earth tones including walnut, bark, espresso, and comparable hues as compliant for mailbox structures. I did not write that guideline, but I smiled when I read it. Marcus came over the day the new guidelines were posted online, and we stood on my driveway and looked at the mailbox for a minute. He said, quote, "You know, most people would have just repainted it." I said I thought about it. He said he was glad I didn't. Dave and Loretta sent me a bottle of wine after the refund checks went out. The note with it said, "On behalf of Sandra's garden gnomes." I laughed at that for a good while. Here's the thing. I didn't get into this to blow up Diane's life. The plan was to read the actual governing documents, find out what the rules actually said, and use them. I was ready to stop at the fines are unenforceable, please rescind them. I was ready to stop at please hold a proper election. Diane made the decision at every step to escalate, to retaliate, to refuse every off-ramp. And every time she did, the next step was already written in the bylaws and the law. I genuinely think she never expected anyone to actually read those documents. She'd been operating on the assumption that everyone would either comply or get frustrated and give up. Most people had, for 6 years. She just happened to find the guy who reads everything. The mailbox post is still up, still brown, looks great. So here's what I want to know from you. If someone had been nickel and diming you with made-up violations for months on end, what would you have done? Would you have just repainted the mailbox and moved on? Drop it in the comments, I want to hear it.